So, World Rugby released a 15, and it's come under some criticism, I think, especially because it's got one member of the World Cup winning squad within it. I think is a big omission. I think there's probably a few players that probably deserve to be in there. I'm gonna go through the team that they've selected. I'm going to talk about other players that I think deserve a shout out for each of the positions. And at the end, I'm going to give you my 23 rather than a 15. Bear in mind when I'm going to be talking about this 23, I'm going to be thinking about it about a cohesive team, kind of like a Lions, but for the world. Don't know who they play, maybe Mars or Jupiter or some other world, but one or two of the selections in here for the World 15, I think in my head were phoned in. I think some people weren't watching the games, personally. And I'm going to be talking about why. But without further ado, let's get into it. So just having it behind my phone stand is where I've got the team sheets. Let's just move the spreadsheet over here. So let's go through the World 15. So at loose head prop, they've got Cyril Bailly. Hooker, they've got Dan Sheehan. Ty Furlong at tight head. Eben Etzebeth and Scott Barrett in the second rows. Keelan Doris at 6. Charles Olivian at 7. Ardy Surveyor at 8. And Antoine Dupont at 9. Richie Mwanga at 10. Will Jordan at 11. Bundy Aki at 12. Gary Ringrose at 13. Damien Pinard at 14. And Thomas Ramos at 15. So, a strong 15, no doubt. And it's full of players that had a pretty good World Cup and some players that had an amazing World Cup. If we're looking at loose head prop, I don't think I have a huge problem with Cyril Bailly playing at loose head prop. I think Andrew Porter had an amazing World Cup. I think he overcame some of the criticism that he's had before in terms of like not always being straight in scrummaging, and he was great all over the loose. I think Andrew Porter was really kind of like peak Ellis Genge like a year or two ago, where his scrummaging is like 9 out of 10 and his loose play was also 9 out of 10. I thought he played really, really well. I think Oxenshea deserves a shout out as well. Came on part of the bomb squad and basically with the other front rowers that came on, put England in the dirt by scrummaging incredibly hard and winning South Africa the game up front with the scrum. Ethan de Groot, I think, played very well as well for New Zealand. And I think a one to watch for the future is Tamati Williams. I think he's got a huge amount of potential. I've seen him playing. I think he's great. He's a young guy coming in. And I think he's probably kind of one to watch for the future. So that's loose head prop. Talking about hooker now. Dan Sheehan selected at hooker. Again, not one I have a huge amount of a problem with as a selection. I think other mentions, Bongi Mbambi? Let me just try and get that right. How to pronounce Bongi Mbambi?
Did I just call him Bambi?
Bongi Mbambi.
No, I don't think that's it. Why do I need the Catalan pronunciation?
Bongi Mbambi.
Bongi Mbambi. There we go. Bongi Mbambi deserves a huge mention as well in my eyes. Obviously, Malcolm Marx was the thinking that he was going to be the starter for South Africa in terms of hooker. But I think Bongi came in and really did a solid job, especially with South Africa taking the risk of bringing in Fourie to replace Malcolm Marx on the bench, but actually bringing Andre Pollard into the squad in terms of taking that place rather than bringing in a hooker themselves. So he really stepped up, particularly with his age as well. He played a lot of full 80-minute games where he hasn't had to do that in the past for South Africa for quite a bit. And I think he plays spectacularly. I've got to give him a shout out. Pito Mavaki as well played very well. I thought he had a good World Cup. Jamie George, I think, saw an improvement in form. Jamie George, I think, has always been a solid player for England. Never going to be the problem. Never going to be the reason why you lose a game, but maybe not the reason why you win a game. I think he really kind of had a bit of a step up in his performances in the World Cup. I think he definitely was worth mentioning. I think we saw an increase of form in Jamie George. And I think it would be unfair to not mention him. And Montoya as well for Argentina. Obviously, Leicester homer, always going to love Julian Montoya, but I think he genuinely had a very good World Cup as well. So, yeah, I've got to give shout-outs to those players. Tight head prop. So, World Rugby go for Ty Furlong, and this is where I don't know. I think he's kind of selected because there was no real kind of massive standout player for tight head prop in this World Cup. I thought all of the tight head props kind of had an okay World Cup. Ty Furlong, don't get me wrong, leading up to the World Cup, superb tight head prop. Both scrummaging and running with the ball, like everything that you could want from a prop, right? I just don't think we saw that form from him in this World Cup, and I don't think that's unfair to say. However, I don't know if I would unseat him from that tight head prop spot. But there was one player that played sensationally and I think really kind of deserves to take that spot from him, but I'll go into that later. So, second rows. So we have Eben Etzebeth and Scott Barrett. Yeah, fine. I have no problems with that. I thought Scott Barrett this is kind of not a coming of age. He's of a decent age already, but this was kind of very much kind of solidifying himself in that second row shirt, rather than playing like second fiddle to like Brodie Retallick or Sam Whitelock. I think he played really, really well. Eben Etzebeth, of course, is just like the best second row in the world, I think, in my eyes. And I think there's no one's even close in second place, to be honest. Obviously, some honourable mentions. Not honourable mentions. Well, okay. No, I mean, showing a little bit. Those are the two I'm going to be selecting in the second row, right? But I think honourable mentions for me are Franco Mostert, who he doesn't get a lot of limelight, but man, that guy grafts. He does a lot of grafting work that goes unseen, that if you don't have that in a team, you start to notice it. But if he starts every game, he plays every game, then you just kind of take it as a given. He played fantastically. I think he was really great for South Africa. RG Snyman, it's a shame about him having the surgery, that he's going to be out for this year. I'd love to see him starting, but I understood why he was part of the bomb squad. I felt for me, he was really kind of the heart of the bomb squad coming on, and he was the kind of a real powerhouse. I mean, what is worse that you get 60 or 70 minutes into a game and you've already been gassed by a very physical South African team, and you see RG Snyman come on the pitch, who can offload like a madman, huge dude, like absolute powerhouse, like, and you realise that this is who you have to go against. So he's a huge player, and I was really looking forward to seeing him play at Munster for a full season, and it's such a shame about his surgery. And I think even though he's not starting the full 80 minutes like a lot of these players, his importance for South Africa and what he does is very important. And I would argue as well that if he was given the chance to start every week in and week out and play 80 minutes, that I think he really would put himself forward as probably one of the best second rows in the world. He has all the measurables of it, and he's really solid. So shame about this year. I want to also talk about Ollie Chesham as well. He's kind of a guy to kind of watch for the future. For those of you that don't know England that well in terms of their setup, Ollie Chesham, I think he's 22. He's roughly that age. And he's coming to this England squad, and he kind of looks like the young Courtney Laws, right? He's very athletic. He's great in the line out. He can play 6 or he can play in the second row, and I think this was a bit of a coming of age for him, along with George Martin, although I don't think George Martin deserves a conversation within this World 15. But Ollie Chesham, I think himself is lined up. I mean, obviously you pray, no injuries, no nothing. He's lined up for a great career if he keeps doing what he's doing, and I can't wait to see how he progresses in Leicester this year. So, yeah. So, we get on to blindside flanker. Keelan Doris is the selection of blindside flanker. This is a big one for me, where I'm thinking, World Rugby, are you literally blind? Oh my God. There are so many other sixers that could be picked in this selection, and you went with a guy that played 8 and had a huge drop in the most important game of Ireland's World Cup. My word, what are you doing? Why is this guy he's a good player, don't get me wrong, but there are so many other selections. Shannon Frizzell, Peter Steph-Tutoy, Peter O'Mahony, who started at 6 for Ireland, I would say is a better player than Keelan Doris. And I would also say Courtney Laws at 6, I think it deserves a mention. A bit of a spoiler, Courtney Laws is not my number 6 selection, but I think he deserves a mention for how well he played in this World Cup. And obviously now he's retiring. So I don't understand this selection of Keelan Doris. I don't get it. He's a great player. He had a good World Cup, but he is not the World 15-6. It makes no sense to me whatsoever. Sorry, he's just not for me. I don't know. That one for me was I didn't know what was going on there at all. So that's blindside flanker. Charles Olivion at number 7. Don't have a huge problem with this. I think he's a great player. I think for a big guy, he plays the 7 position very well. Typically 7, you want them a bit shorter, a bit stouter, being able to jackal over the ball. Olivion is still able to do that, and he's a weapon in the line out as well. He's a very, very good player. And yeah, I can understand why he's been put in this 7 shirt for the World 15. However, there are some other 7s around the world that I think need mentioning. Sia Khaleesi is an obvious one. Yes, comes in injured, and you know, he comes in. I think he still had a very, 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 very good World Cup. And I think Sia Khaleesi not only has a huge effect in terms of the physical side of the game, in terms of being a tackler and a jackler and all that, and a ball carrier as well. But I think he has a lot of intangible element. He's a great leader. It's obvious with that. Being the South African captain, I think it really shows that you've kind of got that level of leadership inside of you. Sam Cane, obviously he's he's been called by Pierre Omani the Richie McCaw, but I honestly think in this World Cup he had a pretty damn good World Cup. It's a shame about the final. He did deserve red, and he might have in some ways cost his team the game in there. So I don't think he's going to, a bit of a spoiler, he's not going to be my 7 for the World 15. But I think he does deserve a mention, because up until that game, he did have a really, really good World Cup. I'm thinking specifically in the Ireland game, he played very well, and in many of the other games leading up to it as well. So I think he deserves a mention, because he is kind of seen as the next player after Richie, and those are really big shoes to fill. And I think he did a good job in this World Cup, and I think it's worth mentioning him. Jack Morgan, I think, was a bit of a coming-of-age story. I mean, I don't know how old Jack Morgan is, right? Yeah, Jack Morgan, it is. He's 23 years old. I think he stepped into that Wales 7 shirt, and I thought Tommy Raffel had that 7 shirt locked up for Wales. He's a Leicester man. I think he was really good. I thought he was one to watch coming into the Welsh squad, but there's no doubt in my mind that Jack Morgan has come in and won that 7 shirt for Wales. I think he played really well. We saw some special things in attack as well as defence from him, and I'm looking forward to seeing how his career progresses. I think he's a great player and one to watch in the future for sure. Now, there's not been many Fiji players named so far, but there's one in particular that I think deserves consideration at open side flanker if we're talking about a World 15. And yes, that is, of course, Levani Botia. What a player. He played really well in that England game. It slowed ball down very well. It's obviously a shame that Fiji didn't progress by that point, not for England fans such as myself, but it would be interesting to see what he would have done at an even bigger stage. And I think you can't doubt his ability, especially at his age, to either play open side flanker or like in the centre. He really is fantastic. He is just sensational for me, and he is really good. I can't. There's no words that I can describe how he gets over the breakdown. He's just, as soon as he locks in that jackal position, there's no getting him off the ball. It's a turnover. You basically just have to not run in the area of the pitch that he's on. He's a great tackler. He runs with the ball incredibly well. I think the one criticism I've had is sometimes he's not always looking for the offload when he's tackled, but in general, just sensational player, and definitely deserves conversation in a World 15 for me. So we get to number 8, Ardie Savea. Again, I don't think there's a lot of argument with this for me. Ardie Savea had a fantastic World Cup. Probably is the best 8 in the world. He has everything that you want from an 8, both in ball carrying and also is fit in terms of getting around the park and being an extra flanker when there's needed to be. So yeah, and he also obviously has the leadership qualities of being a captain as well. So that can't go unnoticed. I like to notice the intangible elements of a player being selected as well as the tangibles. So I don't really have a whole problem with that, but I think there are some players that I think deserve a mention. Gregory Aldrip for France, very good ball carrier. I think he's a great player. I love watching him play for La Rochelle as well. I think he's very, very good. Dwayne Vermeulen. Now, Dwayne Vermeulen for me, he does a lot, I think, of the work that I'm talking about with like Mostart as well, right? I think there's a tangible difference that you can see when Vermeulen is on the pitch to when Jasper Wiese is on the pitch. Jasper Wiese is an incredible player, right? Ball carrying wise, so powerful, great physicality to his game. I think a big criticism of mine of Jasper Wiese of 2 or 3 years ago was that he was great for the 70 minutes he was on the pitch because there would always be a yellow card pending for what he was going to do. He got rid of that out of his game and he really took his game to the next step. However, when Duane Vermeulen's on the pitch, instead of Jasper Wiese, you almost just sense that somehow the opposition the ball is slowed down for them a little bit. They can't get the go forward. Things are just more difficult in the attack for the opposition when Vermeulen's on the pitch. And I think this really plays into the same thing I was talking about with Franco Mosta in terms of having that grafter element, that there's a lot of unseen things that Duane Vermeulen does that really make a huge effect in the game. And I don't think you get that with Jasper Wiese as much. Jasper Wiese, a very powerful runner. I'd say he's a better runner of the ball than Duane Vermeulen, but I think Duane Vermeulen does a lot of the unseen things. And I think he was a huge difference in South Africa in terms of their pack and him being selected at 8 instead of Jasper. And I think the South African coaching staff knew that and recognised that, and that's why he usually got the start at 8 and played most of the game usually as well. I think Jasper sometimes came on. Yeah. Another mention then, I think for me as well, is Ben Earl. Ben Earl was a kind of a selection that I always wanted for England. I thought he was better than Billy Vunipola, who I think has fallen off in terms of his pace a little bit, and I don't think he's going to probably be selected with England in the future. I just think his time has been and gone. He's a little bit too old. He's a little bit step off the pace. Ben Earl just came in and played sensationally. He was a great ball carrier. He basically was like an extra 7 over the ball while playing number 8. And I think, yeah, he's got to be mentioned in this squad, right? I think he was just, he did so much work, and it was such a world of difference as an England fan to seeing him being starting on the pitch, comparing that to when Billy Vunipola was on the pitch. So I think there's more to see from Ben Earl. He's 25 years old. He's got plenty of time left to play for England, and yeah, I think this is a real step up in terms of I can be the England number 8 going forward, and even if he's not the 8, he can play 6 or 7 for me either. So he's got great versatility in the back row. So a great World Cup for Ben Earl for sure. Another player that I want to mention, Quagga Smith. Part of the bomb squad as well. I think he has such an effect, just like RG Snyman does, just something like so many of the bomb squad do. But his kind of ball carrying and his physicality that he comes on, you can tell it's like you got a bruised peach and then you send in someone with a baseball bat to start whacking it after like 60 minutes of it being whacked by something else. He is, I don't know what that analogy is, but he was instrumental in a lot of the wins that South Africa had in terms of coming on and having some great ball carrying and some great tackling from him. So I think he deserves a mention as well. So that's the forwards. Going on to the backs. So Antoine Dupont, no one's arguing, I think, in terms of him being the best, if not one of the best world players at the moment. However, he obviously was injured for parts of the World Cup. He came back for the South Africa game. I thought he I think by his standards, probably had like an 8 out of 10 game against South Africa. There were some great attacks that he was definitely steering. I think he definitely made South Africa in points, scrambling defence in ways that South Africa don't usually have to do, because he was just that little bit quicker than any other scrum half would be across the entire world. So yeah, I mean, you can't say too much about Dupont. He is just sensationally good. I think for me as well, I think other people that need to be mentioned, Aaron Smith. I mean, especially, you don't want to keep bringing age into it, but for his age, and he played like the majority of the games and the majority of the minutes at 9 for New Zealand, and he was superb. So quick at getting the ball out. Great decision making, was just kept New Zealand on the front foot the majority of the time. Obviously, difference is probably in the final, but he had a great World Cup, and I think he was worth a mention. Frank Lamani, another Fijian, I think he had a great World Cup as well. I remember him. He had great distribution. He kept Fiji on the front foot in a lot of attack, and he also had to take some place kicking duties as well. So I think it was worth mentioning him. And I think Gibson Park and Conor Murray deserve a mention as well. Gibson Park, in a lot of attacking moves, would have instrumental elements to that. He would go off into the fly half channel and have Sexton outside, creating an man on the outside. And he was just a great distributor, very quick, bit of a live wire as he usually is. And Conor Murray was great on coming onto the pitch and just steadying the ship in certain games for Ireland. So I think they deserve an honourable mention as well. Going on to fly half, Richie Mo'unga's the selection. Yeah, I mean, for me, I said at the beginning of the World Cup that Johnny Sexton, I had huge doubts about a 38-year-old or a 39-year-old coming out from so much time out of rugby, whether he was rested or injured, etc., or banned. I was worried about him coming back and just being on form. Boy, was I wrong. The guy played sensationally well. He was so good, like peak Johnny Sexton at his age, like in his prime. Yeah, I mean, spoiling what we're going into later on, but he's my number 10 for the World Cup. He was so good, man. I can't say enough good things about Johnny Sexton, about how he just like dances on the on the game line and just plays everything up front and keeps everybody else. He has this ability to just keep the attacking line just up front and up in the face of the opposition at all times, which it enables the rest of the players an easy chance to keep going over the gain line, and it just fuels Ireland's attack. And man, Richie Mo'unga, don't get me wrong, had a great World Cup, and he really had stepped into that 10. He really stepped into the 10 shirt for New Zealand like very, very well. Don't get me wrong, but Johnny just had a different World Cup, right? Matthew Jalabert as well. Great. He has to have all the praise in the world. He was not the pinned on starting 10 coming into the World Cup, and he had to take the helm of one of the most potent and full of potential attacks in one of the best teams in the world, and he had to step in and fill some pretty big shoes, and he did that. He really, really did that, and I can't say enough about him in terms of his attacking potential and what he did for the team in terms of enabling the rest of the French team to attack as though they did, and in my opinion created the most powerful attacking prowess within the entire World Cup. So I think he deserves a huge mention. Andre Pollard, I think in my opinion, deserves a mention. I mean, he comes on to the England game, pretty much wins the England game with the scrummaging, with his kicking and setting up the scrums in the right position. He starts in the World Cup final after being injured out for so long and just coming in and trying to get into the squad after Malcolm Marx is injured, and takes the lead in that 10-roll shirt for South Africa. I think he's underrated in what he does in attack. I think some people were saying like, well, he's just a typical South African fly half, you know. It's like a Mornay Stain, or you're going to go 2 phases, we're not going anywhere kick, right? I don't think he's like that. I think he's got more attacking potential than that, and I think he's a really, really good fly half. He's not going to be my 10, don't get me wrong, but I think it was worth a mention for what he managed to do coming into the World Cup and being part of that World Cup winning squad. Winger. We're going to talk about both wings here because I got again, spoiler, there's going to be no change in terms of my wingers from what's selected. But there are so many wingers that are worth mentioning here. First of all, we'll talk about the starters, Will Jordan and Damien Pinard. Absolutely. They're the best in the world right now. There's no two ways about it. Will Jordan, not only is he such a good winger and attacking at the right position, he's just an incredible footballer. I'm thinking of that like looping pass that he did to set up in the corner. That was just sensational. Damien Pinard as well. He's basically just like can get score tries just by himself. I'm thinking of his signature like kick down the sideline that he's on, allowing it to bounce up perfectly to him, and he can like defeat 3 or 4 men in defence. He's the best at that, and I'm sorry, that has to be the starting wingers for me. There's no other people that reach that 10 out of 10 level. There's a lot of players now that I'm going to talk about that are at that 9 out of 10 level, and that is Mark Telea, Cheslin Colby, James Lowe, Matt Hansen. I think they're all at that 9 out of 10 level in terms of just how good they are. And, you know, another couple of tries here or there for these guys, and they're talked about in terms of starting in this World 15, right? all four of them sensational in my eyes. Matt Hansen is a winger in a slightly different way. You know, he's just a great footballer. He strikes me as one of these guys you could probably put him anywhere on in the backs, right, and he could thrive. But he really is really very good on the wing. And I think another mention as well is Matteo Carreras as well. He's a live wire. He's got such that short stature that means he's got that low center of gravity, and he can change direction so quickly that it makes it very hard to tackle him. And yeah, I think he deserves a mention. There's not many Argentinian players within this that I'm talking about. So yeah. Centres, Bundyaki and Gary Ringrose. Yeah, both had a great World Cup. Can't argue too much with this selection. But there are many players that I think really deserve a mention here. If we're talking about inside centre, Geordie Barrett, I think, stepped into that 12 shirt really well for New Zealand. Jonathan Dancy is obviously very, very good. I think he was injured part of this World Cup, but when he starts regularly, I think he's a real difference maker. I think that's probably the reason that I'm not putting him in the 12 shirt for my selection, but I think he is worth mention. Semi Radradra played sensationally at inside centre. Why was he put at the wing against England? That just, for me, I was so confused about that. He makes such a difference in that inside centre shirt for Fiji that, man, I don't know why they played him at the wing. You could even see during that game as well against England that when he came off his wing and attacked on the inside, Fiji's attack just instantly looked better. So I don't know why he was put on the wing for that game. I feel like that was such a, it was such a selection decision mistake that, yeah, I think Fiji may be kicking themselves a little bit about that decision, but it is what it is, and I think he's worth a mention as well. Another mention, but I don't think he's going to be starting out of any of these guys I mentioned, but another great performer I think was Nick Tompkins. I think he had an understated, great performance in that inside centre shirt. Always gets Wales over the game line. Sets up some great try with dummy runs and also with his passing. I think he's a really good player. I'm looking forward to watching him play for Saracens this year off a great World Cup. So yeah, mention for him as well. The outside centre shirt, Jesse Creel stepped in for Am very well. He had a great World Cup. I think I don't think he's always been rated as a great player. Well, no, as a great player, but not like an elite player, right? But I think he really stepped up in that 13 shirt for South Africa. He played very well, both attacking and defensively. And yeah, he was great. For Fiji, I'm gonna f this name up again. Wasai Naya Kalivu. I think he was great for Fiji. He's a great player to watch. He really balances out Semi Radrandra's direct running by being able to kind of attack people on the outside. I mean, he's a big guy as well, so he can also crash on the inside as well. But he's great. I believe he's Fiji's captain as well, so he's a great player. I think he's worth a mention here. Gail Fiku as well, played very well. And I think George North also deserves a mention here as well. I've talked about George North's ability to go from the wing and now start playing at the outside centre channel. And he does it very well. And I think it's definitely worth a mention that a player can play two positions at a world standard, at a very high standard. So yeah, worth a mention for me. And we get on to fullback. So World 15, they have selected Thomas Ramos. And yeah, had a good World Cup, is a fantastic player. But I think there's other people to talk about as well. Beauden Barrett, for me, I think him playing at 15 was really inspired. I think him and Richie playing at 15 and 10 was really good. I think some of the criticism of Beauden, some of the criticism that I can see myself is Beauden sometimes, if he's played at fly half, isn't the most attackingly creative player. Kind of gets the same criticism as Owen Farrell. Sometimes it's not founded. But Richie definitely offers New Zealand more at 10 than I think Beauden Barrett does. But Beauden Barrett at 15 really gives a safety blanket and stability in that 15 shirt to allow Richie to kind of go nuts, if that makes sense. His kicking out of hand for territory is just superb. He knows when to attack the line again and restart the attack. So I think he had a really good World Cup as well. And yeah, Beauden Barrett for me at 15 was very good. Hugo Keenan, again, very good. Liam Williams, very good. And I think there has to be, I don't think they're in this conversation, and they're not going to be in my 23, but I think Freddie Stewart and Marcus Smith and their interchangeability in that 15 shirt for England, you know, Freddie Stewart was brought in for games where the high ball was going to be a huge risk, and Marcus Smith was brought in for games where England wanted to attack a little bit more. And I think neither of them were divas about it. They realised what they were coming in for and what their ability was. And I really think Smith at 15 for England is really interesting. I'm looking forward to see how he goes in the future. Obviously, Smith is going to be playing at fly half for Harlequins. There's no two ways about it. And you almost wish that maybe Smith just moved to like a superstar club and he was the starting 15. I don't know. He's young, so I think he has a lot of time to develop and become that 10 for England. But there was something about him playing at 15 that it just added a live wire and spark into that England attack. I think it's because he can come from 15 and therefore he can attack the line on a slightly further on the outside channel, which means that he's not kind of trudged down with having to like try against giant back rowers that are trying to nail him, right? He can get into more space and dance around somebody and create space out of nothing because there's more space to do that with. So I think that's a really interesting future for Marcus Smith. But for me, he could be the future number 10, but I think in 15 he really showed a decent ability there. So that's me talking about all the players. Let's get to the big one, right? Let's talk about the starting 23. So with all that said, loose head prop, Andrew Porter. 2, Dan Sheehan. Number 3, easy decision, Dan Cole.
What?
4, Eben Etzebeth. 5, Scott Barrett. 6, for me, Peter Seftutoy. Has to be. 7, Lavani Bottia. I just think he's the best one. I'm sorry. 8, Ardi Surveyor. 9. Now with 9, DuPont's the better player, but who had the better World Cup? I think Aaron Smith had the better World Cup, but I think DuPont's the better 9. So I'm going to go with DuPont starting. And so I'm starting a team, right? I'm starting a team rather than just selecting the best 15, even though that's probably what the World 15 is about. If I'm talking about who had a better World Cup, I think Aaron Smith did. Who was the better 9? Who's the better 9? I think it's DuPont. 10, Johnny Sexton. 11, Will Jordan. 12, Bundy Aki, Gary Ringrose, Damien Pennard. Basically, from 11 to 14, I agree with the World Rugby. 15, for me, I'm sorry, it has to be Beauden Barrett. I think he had a better World Cup than Thomas Ramos did. And it's very, very little to separate the two out, but that's just what it is for me. On the bench, I've got my powerhouse on the bench. I've got Bongi and Banambi. I've got Bongi and Banambi as my hooker replacement. I've got Oxenshea as my loose head replacement. I've got Antonio as my tight head prop replacement. And I've got RG Snyman as my second row replacement. I've got Ben Earl on the bench. Now, this isn't to say Ben Earl is better than Vermeulen, better than Aldrit or Omani or any of the players that I've mentioned in there. But I think he's got the versatility to play 6, 7, 8. I think that's maybe a bit of a homer decision for me. I think Shannon Frizzell you could make the same argument for. So maybe that should be Shannon Frizzell, but I'm going with Ben Earl. Got to at least get like 2 English people in there. And obviously Dan Cole is the starting tight head prop. Number 9, replacement at 21 is going to be Aaron Smith. 22, so at 23, okay. Okay, so 22 for me, George North. I think it's George North. And then 23 is going to be... Who's the final one? Who's going to be the final one? Well, it's got to be a fly half, right? Because we've not got a fly half substitute on the bench. Andre Pollard. F it. Andre Pollard. He came on and played sensationally. And if you've got Johnny Sexton at 10, he's a completely different fly half and he can help you change the pace of the game. So there you go. That's it. That's it. That's the 23. That's it. That's it. Comment. Tell me what you think. Have I made the right selections? Have I made the wrong selections? Do you want to kick me in the teeth for my selections? Do you have some more ideas? Do you know this better than I do? Let me know. But that's it. That's my World 15. 23. World 23.